right here.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second session in our boot camp. If you missed the first one live or just haven't had a chance, my name is Alex. I am a growth specialist at Metricool, and I will let Neil introduce himself right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Neil from the YouTube Google team. I'm a partner manager and I work closely with Metricool, and I'm excited to be here for today's second session.
Yes, we're super excited. We have a lot to go over. This is probably my favorite session because we're talking about creatives today. So I'm just going to give it a second for people to trickle in. Again, if you want to drop where you're tuning in from, or if you have any questions from that first webinar, let us know. But we will go ahead and pop the presentation on the screen and we'll get started since we do have a lot to go over today.
Perfect. We do have a really jam-packed session, and I agree with you, Alex. This is my favorite session as well because it's so visual. We're going to see many creative examples, and today's session is basically create to convert, and we're going to go over how you can build winning YouTube ad creatives. I've already introduced myself. I'm Neil, Strategic Partner Manager for Metricool within Google. And just to give a quick recap of what we covered in the last session, our last session that we did, I think 2 weeks ago now, was how to plan your YouTube strategy like a pro. We spoke about our YouTube AI funnel, the 3 different types of campaigns you can activate based on your objectives, awareness, consideration, and online sales and lead gen. And we also spoke about 2 different approaches you can have. So if you're a performance-oriented advertiser that hasn't really tested out the waters in the YouTube ecosystem yet, we would recommend you to funnel up. And if you're an advertiser that has a clear objective of boosting your brand awareness and getting the word out there and increasing those branded searches, you would basically focus purely on awareness, start in the top part of the funnel with video reach campaigns and campaigns with awareness objectives. So 3 different types of objectives. We are also going to talk about how, depending on your objective, creatives can differ. And for today's session, we basically have the following agenda. Again, really jam-packed agenda. We're going to start off with creative enablers. So we're going to take you through some resources that we have from Google that can help you activate and create good creatives for your YouTube campaigns. Then Alex is going to take it and give us a few creative guidelines of what's the most basic thing that you should have when creating a video or image ad for a YouTube campaign or a demand gen campaign. And then we're going to kick it off with our ABCD framework. Our ABCD framework is a really cool framework that basically covers a best practice with each part of the letters of the framework. So we're going to showcase a few really exciting examples, lots of creative guidelines and best practices on what you shouldn't be missing out when creating a video. And then finally, since we have been talking about the power of shorts and how it's such a booming ecosystem and how it's growing so much, we know that YouTube Shorts cannot not form part of your ad strategy. So we are dedicating a specific section of today's session on Shorts guideline and how you can create winning creatives that are really aligned with the ecosystem, that are native, and that look good when people are scrolling within Shorts. So yeah, really exciting agenda for today. And just to put everyone in the mood for today's session and highlight a crucial point that we see here at Google is that creative is a huge driver of ad campaign outcomes. What we see through a report that we organized was that a good creative contributes to 49% of revenue that a campaign can generate. So there's a huge emphasis on investing time and effort so that your creatives are critical for success. I myself have seen when I used to work with advertisers on their YouTube ad strategies that many of them used to come to me like, listen, Neil, this campaign hasn't performed as we were expecting. And then when we looked at the actual creative, we noticed that the creative was not the best. The message wasn't getting out there very clearly. And to be honest, wasn't a creative wasn't a video that we ourselves would be interested in consuming when spending time on YouTube. So again, here I always like to put myself in the shoes of the user and taking a step back to reflect and look at our actual video and be really critical and understand would would I, if I'm watching a video on YouTube, click and be interested in my product if I was watching this video? So again, 49% is part of the 49% of your campaign success is based on good creative. That's why we're also dedicating this whole session today. So we do see a huge significance and importance of creative when it comes to campaign outcomes. We also see it as a huge challenge. So a global assessment that took place in 2023 revealed that nearly 70% of digital ad spent globally went to ads that did not meet basic platform requirements. And that was over 1 billion US dollars. So there's a huge, massive missed opportunity that underscores the need for better creatives that we're going to align and practice and kind of uncover today in today's session. So that's huge, $1 billion of campaigns that are going into spend that's going into campaigns that don't really have good creative. So let's take note today of the best practices, and this is really going to help us differentiate ourselves from our competitors and position ourselves properly in YouTube. So let's kick it off with the first part of our session today, creative enablers. I myself, again, I've worked with many advertisers in the last few years, and especially when working with advertisers that are usually very performance oriented or SMBs, we notice that there aren't many resources available. You don't have time or resources to create good ad creative. So the good part of today's session is that you don't need multi-million budgets and production houses to create good creatives. We have many different cool resources within Google Ads that you can leverage as of now. And also with Gen AI, we see a huge opportunity of scaling and create really cool pieces that don't really require much investment and can be generated in a matter of seconds or minutes with prompts. So I'm going to showcase 3 resources that are currently available in your Google Ads account. So if you do have a Google Ads account, you already have access to this. The first one is Google Creation and Google Ads. So video creation in Google Ads is a free, easy way to turn existing assets, so logos, images, and a few copies, into videos that drive results. So you basically have access to like a library of video templates that you can use to customize your videos and create brand assets and messages for those videos. So the good part of this is that all the video templates that we have in the library follow and comply with the best practices that we'll see throughout the session. We also have horizontal, vertical, and square templates, and we have different durations based on your objectives. So it's like a huge library of different options. I would encourage you to check it out in your Google Ads accounts. It's in the assets section within assets library, and you can create it in a matter of seconds or minutes, depending on how much control you want to have, but it's pretty self-service, intuitive, and you can create good assets for that you can actually just add into your current campaigns or for new YouTube campaigns. And again, since we are talking about creatives, we also want to make this session really visual and for you to actually see examples. So here we have an example from Roan, a retail commerce brand in the US that saw significant improvement when creating a video campaign with the video creation builder. And they created a video that was optimized towards conversion, so like more lower in the funnel. And what they saw with this campaign was a great improvement in ROAS. So I'm just going to show you the video just so that you see what type of video they used and what type of assets they have and what they got out of it. So yeah, pretty straightforward, makes the message clear. Again, this type of video asset would be for maybe a lower funnel objective campaign, maybe for a remarketing audience that the user knows what the brand is about and gets them. And what this video does is gets the message out there of the new product collection and that the fact that there are sales. So a really cool example, and there are many different asset templates that you can leverage for this. So we have the video creation in Google Ads. Then we have the trimming video option within Google Ads. This is pretty intuitive. It's a tool that helps you cut your video. So let's say you have a really long video that you've created for another platform, or it's really old and you want to chop it up and make it useful for like a bumper campaign or a video that's 6 seconds or shorter. You'd basically just take this original video and chop it up in the Google Ads account. Again, this is also available from the asset library. And then third, we have the voiceover in Google Ads. I personally think this resource is pretty cool, especially given the fact that over 95% of YouTube videos are watched with sound on. So leveraging audio is crucial to reinforce creative messaging and also is used to drive better video performance. So what we have here is an easy, free way to integrate and add high quality, lifelike text-to-speech voiceovers to any existing video asset in a matter of seconds. And just to show you an example, because whenever we talk about like these automated voiceover tools we always tend to think that these sound a bit robotic, are not too realistic. So I'm just going to show you an example from Sony. We all know Sony, an electronics company in the US that actually used Google Ads voiceover in their ads campaign. And what they saw, it was a 25% higher brand lift from using this resource. And I'm just going to show it to you, just so that you hear and you see in real time how the audio looks like. Not looks like, sounds like.
The Sony Bravia XR TV is the world's first TV with a cognitive processor. It has the power to think like the human brain and truly understand how you see and experience the world. Making every picture breathe, the TV brings you closer to reality and surrounding you with the most immersive sound. The Sony Bravia XR TV series.
Yeah, so that was all created within Google Ads, zero cost. And I personally like the way they played around with the noises in the back. I thought it was really immersive, as the name of the campaign indicates. And it sounded pretty realistic to me.
I was going to say the same thing. I think it sounded pretty realistic. And I also caught the adding of the sounds, and I think it all integrated pretty well. I would have never guessed that it was all created here.
Yeah, and I love playing around, and whenever a new tool comes out or a new resource like this comes out, I always investigate. And when I was playing around with the tool, I noticed you can even customize what type of tone you want. If you want it to be a man or a woman, what type of tone you want to have. So it can really align to your brand, and you can play around with different options. So I think it's pretty cool. So those are 3 self-service tools that we currently have within your Google Ads account that you can leverage now. Again, all 3 are free, pretty easy to use. In a matter of minutes, you can create good voiceovers, good videos with the templates that work on different formats. And these are available. So again, feel free to play around with them, test them, and see if they can work for you. Then we are moving on to the second type of resource that we have. So we all know Gen AI is rapidly revolutionizing creative content creation. It's democratizing the process and expanding our creative possibilities and making advances that are even more accessible to anyone. So last week we had our Google Marketing Live where we launched and we explained all our new solutions and tools that we've been working on. And one of the tools that we highlighted was VO2. This is from our Google DeepMind team. VO is our state-of-the-art video generation model. I've personally played around with it and I'm a huge fan of it. It's a Gen AI text-to-video and image solution that can generate high-quality, photorealistic videos from a text prompt or an existing image in a matter of minutes. I'm going to showcase a few examples because I myself, when I was presented the solution, couldn't believe that everything that VO created was actually AI. So on one end, it creates diverse ad creatives at scale. It can produce stunning visuals from an image. So here we can see an image of a couple and how that was generated then into a video in a matter of seconds. So that's a really cool example. And then here we have another example of how someone took an original photo of a model wearing a sweater, a Google hoodie, and then changed the type of clothing they were wearing, and then even created a video out of it. So if you're a retail brand out there and you have a huge product catalog and you don't have enough time or efforts to kind of create a million images, this is a really good solution for you. And then here we also have a really cool video that was generated with prompts. This is all AI. Someone just prompted what they wanted. They wanted a really movie-like scene with a boat in the Sydney harbor, and in a matter of minutes, this was created with using VO. So super interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how it's gonna change the way assets are created, and especially ads are created in YouTube. So I'm excited to see how this evolves throughout the next months. Again, this is something that was recently launched. It is available in the US through Gemini Advanced. And I am going to ping Alex a link just so that you can investigate and play around with it to see how you can actually access this tool if you're in the US. It is currently being worked on for other markets. So if you're based outside the US, pay attention, especially to the link we're sharing here. It will be accessible to your market soon.
Perfect. I'm going to drop that link in the chat, and then we'll drop it in at the end as well in case you missed it.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this, so I just wanted to share the link so you could investigate and kind of be alert on when it comes out. And if you're out in the US, you can play around with it.
Super exciting.
Yes. And then lastly, many of the advertisers always ask me for inspiration. They want to understand what their competitors are doing. We recently launched a platform, like an externally shareable platform, which is a YouTube's best in ads platform, which here what you basically do is just add the industry that you're in, the market, the type of objective you have if you're looking to create a video for awareness, action, etc. And then you can actually see what your competitors are doing. So a really cool exercise of what you can do is kind of after this session, after you get access to all the best practices, kind of review the market, what's going on, and see if they actually follow the best practices. And if you are creating a video asset, see how you can differentiate yourself and add some of the best practices that you may notice your competitors are not doing.
Yes, and this link is also going to be in the post email that is sent out to all attendees, so you'll have access to the presentation and all the information there too.
Yeah, so two really cool resources. Again, you're going to get access to them, so feel free to leverage them and understand what your competitors are doing. Perfect. And I'm going to pass it over to Alex.
Okay, now we're going to talk about creative guidelines. I'm super excited about talking about the best practices for creatives because sometimes they are super simple, but they're often overlooked. So I'm going to rapid fire through this list, and then we'll go through each slide and talk about them a little bit more in depth. But this is just kind of a great overview to have next to you when you're creating your ads, and just make sure that you go through each of these and ask yourself these questions or think about these things, like don't overcomplicate, keep attention spans in mind, follow guidelines. And then I do want to just go back to session 1 if you attended it. We talked about different audiences, so it's really important to keep different audiences in mind because more than likely one ad isn't going to serve everyone. And we also want to be reminded that authenticity doesn't always need to be high production, and we have some great examples of that as well. And then if you've identified something that works, you can always use it again. So the first thing that we are starting off with is keeping it simple. So with text and image, this is always the best way to go. You'll see on the left-hand side, we have some great examples, and on the right-hand side, maybe some examples that could be improved a bit. You want to make sure that your ad is clear. When users are looking at it, you don't want anything that is key imagery to be blocked. So you want to move away from any dark images. For example, that image in the lower right-hand corner. It's a cool image, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to know what brand that is just by looking at it because it is darker. I might have to like zoom in on the logo. Like to me, it's just like a cool car shot. And then you want to always keep in mind that reality beats stock. So if you can use more realistic images, that's going to help you as well as humanizing your product. So you want to make sure that if it's possible, you can feature people in your ads. It's really common, not even just like in paid advertisements, but even in social media, when there's a person and you're seeing them talk or just they're in the image themselves, that content tends to outperform content of just like images, like stock images, anything like that. And then another example too would be with your logo. You want to make sure that it's incorporated in a way that makes sense. So maybe it's part of the story versus it just being slapped like a sticker on top. For example, that top right image, Oral-B is in the corner. And then again, it's like a stock, more of a stock image. So these are just like little things for you to keep in mind that can really just elevate your ads. And that shouldn't be too much of a difference, of a big difference when you're creating them.
100%. Just to add on to the great best practices that you just mentioned, Alex, these image ads within YouTube are for demand gen campaigns, and demand gen campaigns usually show up in mobile. And as we all know, even though our mobiles are getting bigger and bigger, our screens aren't too big. So again, we don't want to have something too cluttered because no one's actually going to see it properly. So it's just something to think about.
Yes, absolutely. And then similar to what I just said about images, we want to keep the same things in mind with text, right? We want to be clear. We want to make sure that we have simple call to actions, but also a sort of value proposition. And you want to make it, I would say, the easiest as possible for your user to understand like the next step. So a great example would be enjoy up to 40% off and free shipping. This is great because you're giving them a deal, right? Like that 40% off and free shipping. And you're kind of telling them like what you want them to do next. Whereas like the bad example would be from $399. And that's a lot more vague. It doesn't really ignite that next step. Like, oh, like maybe I should make that purchase since it's only from $399. Whereas like if you're giving them an incentive with that 40% off and that free shipping, they're more than likely to take that next step once they're watching the ad. Because of course, like a big part of advertisements is of course you want them to see the ad, but you also want them to take that next step. So clarity is best with text, and also, you know, if you can add in an offer and clear CTAs. Another thing, remember when I mentioned attention spans? They are getting shorter and shorter, especially with the rise of short form content with shorts. So you want to build your advertisements for attention. On the left-hand side, you'll see we have that traditional story arc. So that's kind of, you know, that lead in, your build, you have a climax, and then usually you have like your offers, your conclusion. I would encourage you to test a emerging story arc. So this is going to be something that has like a strong cue. So maybe that's a hook or just like a really impactful lead in. And then it's going to have multiple peaks. These multiple peaks are going to keep that attention span locked in. So it's really just helping you attract those users and keep them all the way through your advertisement, especially if you want them to get to the end. So I would heavily suggest, like, you know, if you do usually do the traditional story arc, try to do the emerging story arc and just see kind of how that works out for you. And then this is going back to what Nil was saying about how advertisements are a lot of the times viewed on mobile. You want to pay attention to where your content is placed. This is super important. And one great thing about building advertisements is that a lot of the times it's visually being built. So you can see where your text is going to go, where the images are going. So it's really nice because then you can make sure that images aren't being blocked, your CTA isn't being blocked, your logo, things that are important to your advertisement, make sure you keep them in that viewable area. Here we have two examples of more of a desktop version. So of course, you know, you want to avoid that top right corner, you want to avoid the lower right, anything that's going to be blocked. And then you'll also see on the advertisement side, there is a viewable area. So it's important to always keep in mind the different formats that people are going to be watching the content on, and strategically placing your content in those like green areas or red areas in this case. And then that's just kind of a lead in into this slide, which is remember to create for big and small screens. So don't have too much text. Make sure it's visible, like you can read it if you're reading it on a big TV or if you're reading it on a small mobile. There are so many different formats nowadays. So if you start with this in mind, you'll save yourself so much time later, because a lot of the times people don't necessarily think about all the different formats, and then you'll go and you'll see your ad isn't necessarily looking great on mobile, and you'll have to go back and make those changes. So if you just remember these guidelines from the first get-go, it'll save you so much time, so you don't have to go back and change things.
100%. And we also saw in the first session how much connected TV was growing. So also remember that YouTube ads are placed heavily on connected TV because our audience is there.
Absolutely. And then with this one, so now we're going to go into some examples. Nil is going to play the video, and then we'll talk about why this is a good ad.
Perfect.
We saved $85 by literally clicking twice and installing a free browser add-on. Honey, anytime you check out on your computer, it will search the entire internet, and if it finds a coupon code, it will apply it. Here's how Honey works. We're currently on Macy's. We have a $279 mixer, and we're gonna add it to our bag. Because we have the Honey add-on, all we have to do is hit apply coupon when checking out on any website. And boom, Honey actually found a coupon code that saved us $50. And that in a nutshell is how Honey works. And here's a list of all the websites Honey works on. You should really install it because you'll save thousands of dollars of your lifetime. Here's how you install Honey. You hit add to Chrome, you hit add extension, now you have Honey. Even Chandler can do it. Nice! Go to joinhoney.com. You'll save a lot of money. That's joinhoney.com.
So that is an example of a really great ad. And one thing that I immediately got from the beginning is that it hooked me in, right? They used the hook, we saved $85 by clicking twice. So that automatically for the viewers is being like, oh, okay, like, what did they click? You know, how did they save this $85? And then that pacing, remember, we were talking about more of that traditional arc. This editing and pacing was made so that it's moving quick enough so that you stay tuned into what the content is about and you want to get to the end. And then, of course, with that CTA, it was also very clear. They had, obviously, the CTA is to join Honey. So they want you to click through and join, but they're combining that with the fact that they want you to save money, which is the value to the user who's watching it. So join Honey plus save money is a really great and simple, clear CTA for them to use.
I personally love this ad. I like the way they introduced Honey throughout the whole video, because at the end you're introducing a brand, and I remembered what the brand was, and the CTA was super clear at the end.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's nice too, because like immediately you obviously you see the creator, you see Mr. Beast, so that maybe you don't exactly know what the brand is going to be, but they keep referring back to Honey. So it's nice because you're using kind of like that public figure, which is again also another hook in a way, and then using that brand storytelling to really make it authentic to their brand. And then here's another one where again we're going to play it and then we'll talk about it.
Perfect.
Oh my god! What the? Dude, in one? You're like him Kardashian. Did it on you? Yeah. It's like the slot machine. We're in Vegas. What? Wait, we have to. So that's 1 minute, bro. 1 minute. What the? That's way more than I thought it was gonna be. Okay.
This video is a great example of you don't necessarily need the highest production value to create a great ad. And this is, I think, can be a stopper for many people. They get worried about not being able to produce these high quality ads, but especially in this day and age with, again, like short form content and just that authenticity that people crave, you can create ads out of anything. User generated content is so popular right now. So this video, maybe right off the bat, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, like I'm going to use this for an ad. But when they tested it, it actually performed like on par with another control ad that they had. And again, this was authentic to the platform. It was authentic to the brand, which is why it works so well.
Yeah. And besides being authentic, I like how it connected with the audience, right? So I could really see the emotion of the person that used Wix and how they leveraged that to create a really compelling story. And I could really feel like the excitement and the room that they were in. So I thought that was a really interesting way of connecting with the audience.
Yes, absolutely. It was very creative.
And authentic, yeah.
Yes. Okay, and now moving into auditing your content regularly. So this is a specific tip that we like to give out in general when talking about like social media and paid advertisements, but I always encourage people to look at what has worked well for you organically, especially when you're getting ready to start that paid ads strategy. Can any of the content that you've been using previously be used as an ad? Maybe it's the hook, maybe it's the format. If you've identified that content that works well, you kind of already have a nice starter to creating your paid advertisements. And this can be done anywhere. You can look natively in YouTube, or you can also look in Metricool, and it's going to give you an overview of what is and isn't resonating with your ideal audience, right? If we're going back to that first session where we were talking about our different audiences that we want to cater to, looking at your past content is really going to help you there. Here, I have a screenshot of Metricool, and I sorted the content by the average view duration. I wanted to see what content we were posting was keeping people on the longest, like what hooks were bringing people in. And this was a great way for us to start with our own advertisements to be like, okay, like this type of content works well, this hook works well. So I highly recommend auditing your content regularly, like once a month at least, because all of that data can really help you fine tune your strategies. I'm also going to drop a link to Metricool in the chat. If you would like, this feature is completely free and it's really helpful and visual. And then kind of it basically all goes hand in hand, but find what works and replicate it. You don't have to start from scratch every single time. You'll see on the right-hand side, we have a couple of our own advertisements that like Metricool has run in the past. But again, like if you've identified a format, a hook, or even a style that works really well, try it again. You can create new content, or you can even create assets from existing content, which Neil mentioned earlier. You don't always have to start from scratch. If you have that content and you can, like, let's say, for example, you have long form content and you can shorten that down, that can be really helpful with, again, just already having those assets ready with something that you know performs well organically. So it could be a good test to try it on a paid strategy. We also have a nice blog that kind of just talks about best practices for creatives that we're also going to drop in the chat. That's like a really great read that will kind of basically will go over in depth a lot of what we've already talked about in this section.
Amazing, super interesting examples, Alex. I loved all the examples that you showed. We're now going to move on to the next part of the session, which is the ABCD framework for good creative. Again, with the examples you saw recently, you'll see that most of them do follow what we're going to see now. So you might connect each best practice with the examples you saw before, and we are going to showcase lots and lots of examples in the upcoming slides. Just before starting, is anyone here familiar with the actual ABCD framework? Does anyone actually know what it means, or are we all on the same page that we know our ABCDs, but we don't actually know how this applies to YouTube? I'm just gonna, you feel free to comment. If anyone knows what the actual ABCDs are, feel free to comment. I myself didn't know about them before I joined Google, and I think Alex didn't know about them either until I presented them to her. Each letter of the ABCD is a best practice. So we're gonna start with A. If anyone guesses it before I move to the next slide, I'll be very impressed. But the first best practice is A, attract. This is the first pillar of the ABCD framework, and it basically talks about the best practice of how you can attract your audience and how you can grab and sustain their attention from beginning to the end of your video ad. And within this first best practice, we're going to talk about different elements. The first element is frame. Here, the guidance is for us to use type framing on the subject, whether it is a product or a person. It's super important to show and clearly show the person or the product you're talking about in your ad using non-obscure angles and making it easy for the user to understand what product you're showcasing, just so that they can process and you can sustain the engagement. Here we have a great example from Salesforce with their YouTube ads campaign, how they actually reworked their ads video from this, which is a laptop screen with their platform, to this. So here's the after version demonstrating the power of type framing. What they did was basically make sure that their subject and product were prominent throughout the whole video in a clear way so that the viewer was It was easy for the viewer to understand and follow, as well as focus and connect with the ad. And this basically aligns with the best practice of attracting, right? Making sure that it's easier for the user to follow and understand what you're talking about. And again, we were talking about mobile screens being small, super important for video ads that are going to show up in phones, because those screens, even though they're big, they're not as big as we want them to be. So framing is super important. Then pacing is also very important. We should aim for for 2 or more shots to appear in the first 5 seconds of our ad. The first 5 seconds of our ad are super important because many of the formats that we have are skippable after 5 seconds. So we have those first 5 seconds to make a great impression to our audience. And it's very important that we pace properly. And the best practice is to have those at least 2 shots in the first 5 seconds of the ad. So scenes should change and support engagement and provide, and change is really important to provide that engagement. So here we have a really cool example from MailChimp that illustrates 2 or more shots in the first 5 seconds. So I think 2 shots is the best practice. Again, we don't want to we don't want to drive our audience crazy with many different shots, but we should have engagement and a good pace when we're kicking off the ad. So that's super important to note. And this slide, I think, does a really good example in visually emphasizing the importance of phasing throughout the first 5 seconds. You can see how a quick succession of shots, along with text overlays, helps us maintain attention and win with those crucial initial moments. So here we have like 2 different shots. Again, I think this ad was from COVID, so one gives us context, and then the pace changes up in the first 5 seconds. And this is a great way to hook your audience, just to grab their attention. Again, that narrative that we spoke about before, when we look at historical advertising with TV ads, we see that it's the other way around. With YouTube, it's the other way around because we want to grab your attention because we know that we don't have as much time as we could if with due to the nature of the format. So we spoke about framing, pacing. Those 2 form part of attracting. Then there's also the part of humanizing. So another aspect of attracting is to humanize your ad. We do see that when people do appear in your video and you open them with on-screen presence that fits to your storyline and have them address your audience directly, there is higher impact. And it's super important to show faces that attract immediate attention, heighten emotional motivation, and increase engagement with your audience. So if we do have a video that someone's actually speaking directly to a camera and someone's addressing your user directly, we can see that this can directly influence behavior.
I will say that this is very common, I feel like, across the board, even in organic social media. I feel like people like to see people. So if you have the ability to put a human in your ad and, address them, make that human connection, I think it always resonates a lot better.
Yeah, and provides great context. If you're selling a product, seeing how someone's actually using it is going to be key into selling it. So humanizing is crucial. And then finally, there we are in YouTube again, especially with shorts. There's a lot of engagement. So surprising is a huge part of attracting, and we do see that when ads use stunning, unexpected, and memorable imagery, they usually have a higher brand recollection. So again, in the first 5 seconds, let's give it all we can and make sure that we're attracting the audience with an element of surprise. Hooking them to the video, and then you can take advantage of their attention to actually explain what you want to sell them. So that's the first best practice, which is attracting. We covered a few pillars. The next part of the ABCD framework is brand. So this is about making sure that your brand is prominent and memorable throughout your ad, because at the end of the day, we do want to position our brands effectively, and YouTube allows us to do so. So in this part of the session, we're going to basically talk about how you can reinforce in a natural and engaging way your brand throughout the video. So following like a traditional order of a video ad, what you want to do first is introduce. So you want to introduce your brand or product within the first 5 seconds of your ad, and you want to make sure that it's introduced organically, right? So you want to take advantage of multi-sensory experiences to further further increase and build brand-related associations. And here we see a really cool example in the bottom part of how Monday.com actually introduced their brand and actually said, hey, Monday.com is this. So that's really important to introduce your brand in the first 5 seconds, because as we all know, many users are also not going to watch more than 5 seconds. So if they should take away something from those short 5 seconds, it is your brand and what your product is. And then you can re-engage them again with another type of ad, if that's the case. So we should introduce, and then the next part for brand is also mentioning. Audio mentions of your brand by people on screen are associated with better performance and higher brand recall. So it's super important that your brand, is actually being mentioned organically throughout the video in a really cool way. So here we have an example from Monday.com. They do a great job with their YouTube ads campaign. So they are going to be popped up a few times along this presentation. And I just want you to hear how Monday.com was introduced in this ad.
Oh, the first day that we signed up for Monday.com, our department was already able to connect our processes, our software, actually everything into one centralized place. So the first day. Before Monday.com, our teams worked on different platforms. We couldn't find stuff. Things were falling through the cracks. Monday.com didn't just close these gaps, they sealed them shut. Like every detail of our work now has a place on a platform that's easy to use. That means that anybody in the department can easily track any process or project. At any given time, I can rely on Monday.com to tell me who's working on what and where everything stands. It's made our team faster, more agile. We're just better.
I don't know about you, Alex, but I lost count of how many times they mentioned Monday.com, but I felt like they mentioned it in a really organic way. It was really aligned with their storytelling. So they spoke about how before they didn't have Monday.com and the impact of having it after. They also introduced it in the first seconds. They introduced their logo, and they also closed up the video, which we are going to see at the end is a best practice, with a strong brand positioning and a CTA of what they should do after watching the video. So I feel like with the audio, with the way the presenter presented the brand was really good, and the person who watches this video is going to definitely recall Monday.com in case they already hadn't.
I definitely agree. And I like too that like they mentioned Monday.com like you said, right within those first 5 seconds. And then it does take like they take a little bit of a break, and then it's like repeated again towards like that last half of the ad. But I think because they did say it so often, we remember it, but it's not overkill at the same time. So I think it was really strategic.
100%. And then the last best practice when it comes to brand.
Oh, the first day that we signed up for Monday.com, our department was already able to connect.
Sorry about that. The last best practice is basically reinforcing. So here, a huge part of it is logo. So logo placements matter. And I always see, at least when I see a YouTube ad, that the logo is present in the top part of the ad and is there. So super important to integrate the logo into your story and making sure it's present throughout the whole video through a overlay or persistent watermark. And then also it's super interesting to see how you can actually integrate it naturally. So we see both cases here. On the top part of the presentation, we have an example again from Monday.com. We're not sponsored by them or anything. I just think they do really good creative in which they integrate their logo like really organically within the video. And then in the bottom part, we have an example from MailChimp in which you can see, even though it's super small, their logo in the top left part of the video. And that logo, I can imagine, is present throughout the whole video. And when you combine that with someone mentioning it in the first 5 seconds and reinforcing it throughout the whole video, we have a great way of making sure the audience knows what your brand is about. So yeah, we've covered A, we've covered B, so attract and brand. C would be the next one. I don't know if anyone's going to guess before I switch slides, but C is connect. So we're going to talk about how you can connect and build on emotional and functional connection with your audience. So again, there's a huge part of success of the campaign that is creative. Another part of the success of the campaign is audience. We did speak about that in the last session. So let's say once you have identified who your audience is, you want to make sure you connect with them throughout the video. So we're going to talk about a few elements that you can do to connect with them. So under connect, the first aspect is people. Again, we should make people and your potential users the core to your story. People help us hook the viewers in ads and facilitate connections. And also be using everyday people like me, you can clearly associate the product to them and put a potential prospect in the shoes of the person they're seeing in the video. And this will allow them to kind of increase their purchase intent and connect with the product you're selling. And I think a clear example here is the example we saw before with Mr. Beast on how they were actually talking about honey, their experience with the product, and the overall storytelling on how, even though he's a celebrity, how a person used the product and what their experience was. So that was a really cool way of connecting with the product and humanizing it also. Then another way to connect is through functional messaging, product walkthroughs with shots that show what a product is rather than simply telling what it is. That simply telling what a product is and explaining user benefits and value propositions are highly effective. So again, putting yourselves in the shoes of your potential audience, kind of solving a potential problem they have with your product and walking through with a message that conveys tangible and observable measures and actions of what your audience can do. What we also see here that's super interesting is that when people address the user on screen and break the fourth wall, we see that ads are really easy to follow, understand, and are much easier for their users to action on. So again, feel free to break that fourth wall and actually invite the audience to do something. So yeah, we spoke about people, making it functional, and then a huge part of connecting is making it emotional. So we should lean into our emotional levers when it comes to creative for your brand. Humor is a great way of doing it, and I think the example of Mr. Beast was a great example on how they used humor to do it, and is a great way of storytelling. That's not the only way. There's also great ways of using suspense and resolution. So coming up with a really suspenseful first 5 seconds of an ad, creating like a problem, and then coming up with a resolution can also help foster emotional motivation throughout an ad. So different ways of doing it. The core message here is to connect and use emotions, because at the end of the day, there are people behind watching the videos that want to connect with your brand.
100%. Emotion goes such a long way.
Yeah, I agree. So let's say we've done a really good job at attracting our user in the first 5 seconds. We've introduced our brand. We've connected with them. The next part and the last best practice is directing. So that's the D of the ABCD. At the end of the day, you're an advertiser. You want your audience to actually do something, whether it be buying your product online, leaving their lead information. So you want to make it very clear what is expected from them, right? So you want to direct them and clearly telling your audience what action they can take after watching the video. And this is a really great way of closing the overall storytelling and finishing off the video, just to drive action. Here's an example from Asana. If I'm not mistaken, they're SaaS. And here's a really good example of what they did at the end of the video. So on one end, they introduced their brand in the first 5 seconds, and then they wrapped up the video with this simple CTA of, hey, log on to asana.com and learn more about our product. And also to incentivize their audience. So learn more and try it for free. So simple, effective call to action that is going to be great for guiding the viewer on the next step and also inciting them to test out your product, in this case with a try for free CTA, which I think is a really great way to hook your client. So that's a really cool way of doing it. Again, based on your objective, and we're going to cover like different objectives that you can have within YouTube ads. You want to drive a specific action versus another. So let's say, I'm going to show you an example. This example is really optimized towards the lower part of the funnel. So it's directed to action. Again, this creative is optimized towards someone that may already know your brand. Maybe it's a remarketing audience or someone who might have already engaged with your product, and is a really good way into driving direct action. I'm not going to give away more. I'm just going to play so you actually see the ad. So great, again, a great example. I think maybe they could have used the audio voiceover that we spoke about in the beginning, again. But this is a great example of a campaign that could be more lower funnel, a great demand gen campaign. I personally would put maybe a remarketing audience to kind of impact people that have already been to my website to kind of close the sales cycle with this last message so that my potential user joins and actually starts doing what the video did. So yeah, so you can use the ABCDs can kind of be molded based on different objectives. So if we have awareness, the main core of the ABCDs are to pump up the volume when you want to drive attention. You want to put your brand up front and center, and then you want to connect and make people the core of your story. You might not be too focused on driving action in this awareness campaign. So just kind of put the word out there, what your brand is and what you're trying to solve. Then for consideration, you want to hero the product, show how it works, be relatable, maybe have someone demo it or show someone actually using it, and then plant the seed of urgency so that they can actually start informing themselves on what your product is. And then finally, with action campaigns, you want to make the product the ad. So you want to, and I think that what we just saw was a great example of an advertiser who did it. You want to be exact, you want to be tangible, and you want to present a specific ask after the context is set. So again, you can play around with the ABCDs based on your objective. There's no clear solution that fits all. Again, based on your objectives, you can play around with the message.
I definitely think this is a great slide to reference back to when you are creating those ads based off of that objective. This is like just such an easy, clear way to see and make sure you are following that framework.
100%. And another thing here is that one ad cannot also rule all of them. So and what we've been talking about is how you should be leveraging the whole YouTube AI funnel. Again, there are best practices of if you're starting for the first time, start with demand gen. If you're focused on awareness, start with video view campaigns. The ideal situation here would be kind of leverage the whole AI funnel. And we do see examples of clients that work really well, the different ABCDs based on different objectives, to work on a full funnel strategy that kind of helps them accomplish each of the different objectives. And here I just want to make it visual. If I'm not mistaken, this is a Monday.com also ad. And then I'm just going to show you like different assets that they used and how they worked on awareness videos, consideration videos, and action videos, just so that you see how they've used the ABCDs in that last slide to kind of meet the different objectives. So let's start with the broad message with the awareness type of video.
This is an ad for a project management tool called Monday.com. This is what it looks like, and this is what it feels like. So the tool works like this. We call this a board. Just put everything you need to do here, then put who's in charge of it here, and see where everything stands here. Also, it works on your phone because it's 2019. Click drag and drop to create your board exactly the way you need it. You'll never drop the ball on the important stuff again. So go to Monday.com and create your free account today.
Yeah, so that was an example of an awareness type of video. I like the way they used the audio throughout the whole video, very ASMR, which is a great trend on shorts, and kind of weaved a story throughout the whole video. They did also drive action at the end, which was interesting to see. Then we have more of an explainer, consideration type of video in which they're heroing the product and planting a seed of urgency. So here's the example.
If you manage a team, you should be using Monday.com. It's a platform to manage any team and any project. Marketing campaigns, classic project management, sales pipelines, creative productions, anything. We'll start with a board. Here you can track everything your team is working on. Columns are completely customizable, so you can track what's important to you. Everything is visual. See who's in charge of what and easily prioritize. Upload files and get quick approvals and feedback. Views let you see the information in your board in different ways. Make sure projects don't overlap. Or see the breakdown of progress. Whoa. If you want to see the bigger picture, use dashboards. You as a manager can get key insights and metrics from all your projects in one place. You can even broadcast dashboards around the office. Monday.com integrates with your favorite tools and combines everything your team is working on into one.
Yeah, I think we get the. It's a really good product demo. So interesting way to hear the product. And then finally, an action. And I think what they did here was kind of use a case study from a client that actually went proactively and was an advocate for Monday.com.
If you manage a team, you have to try Monday.com. Monday.com is a platform to track everything your team is working on. We use it for all our projects: marketing, product development, HR, creative productions. I love Monday.com because it's totally customizable, and that's something I couldn't find in any other management tool. I can choose what information I want to track: project owners, statuses, deadlines, which means more time for actual work. I tried managing everything we were doing with spreadsheets. It was a nightmare. Now we have a tool that's easy to use. It's given us the confidence to take on more complex projects. There's so much you can do: filter through data, get breakdowns of information, and see highlights from across departments. It gives a sense of everything falling into place. Seriously, if you manage a team, you need to use Monday.com.
Yeah, so a really good example of humanizing the product and showcasing firsthand how someone actually got success from using it and how they drove to action at the end. I am missing the logo in the bottom part, or like a present logo throughout the video, but again, I think it captures like the main best practices.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a few minutes left, but I think we can definitely squeeze building for like the best practices for shorts, and kind of talk about the main trends that we see when it comes to YouTube Shorts. So I'm going to try and cruise and make sure that we get the main messages out here. So the best practice that we did speak about, I think, are generally also applicable to YouTube Shorts. The only differences that we would see here is that their DNA is a bit different. So what we see here is that YouTube Shorts ads should be native. They should blend seamlessly with surrounding organic shorts, since it is something that people are actually scrolling throughout. So it shouldn't feel like a disruptive ad. It should feel something that's more authentic. Most of the time, the ads that work the best have an unpolished, in real life, homemade vibe, rather than a perfectly produced corporate high glossy style ad. They should also feel personal, peer-to-peer, casual, and again, really human and referencing and addressing the viewer. Also, there's a huge upbeat part of it Shorts is fun. It's short, it's organic, it's really spontaneous. So your ads should also reflect that. They should be humorous, have a spontaneous vibe, and prioritize engagement. Shorts are short. As we all know, shorts are really social, they're shareable, likable, really engaging, and your ads should also reflect that. And when it comes to ads and shorts, there's a huge opportunity to be more native. Here's an example of ads that are more adapted to shorts, some that might be not so adaptive. What we see here is that everything works, but whatever is more organic, direct, and kind of what we spoke about before, always tends to work better. So here's an example of one same advertiser that did this video ad.
Have we run out of milk? Make more room for beauty. The hottest new arrivals join all your favourites at Boots.
Found it!
So we have a kind of what we would consider a lower adapted shorts ad. So it's a great video. I'm not saying it's not, but I do feel like this video was previously a YouTube ads campaign and was made vertical. And if we compare it to a higher adapted shorts campaign, we see this example.
New beauty doesn't have to break the bank. I'm Sunny. I'm a beauty specialist, and I'm going to be showing you some of my favorite in-store picks for under £20. First product for under £20 are the Made by Metricool blushes. I love them because they have vibrant color, they blend easily, and NYX fat oil. This lip oil gives a
So yeah, that's an example. It seems it's very in the language of shorts, very content creator led. So we do see more success in these types of ads, especially if the objective is to drive action, someone proactively explaining their experience, kind of hooking you in with a story so that you consume it and consume it in a social way.
I will say that from someone like me personally, I consume a lot of content, and I would definitely gravitate more towards the second video that we just watched as opposed to the other one, just because the other one was a lot more high production. And when I'm thinking about like scrolling through short form videos, I would automatically clock that it's an ad and I would just continue going. Whereas the one on the right, I'd be like, oh, like, let me see what those top picks are.
100%, I agree with you and resonate with what we just said. So I feel we spoke about a lot of best practices. You are going to get access to this deck with the links that we spoke about. And the main message now is it's your turn to act, kind of play around with the resources that we spoke about. If you already have running video creatives, maybe reflect on some of the best practices that we spoke about. Also check out that tool that we spoke about to kind of like use get inspiration from your competitors, and also leverage like the Metricool audit that was presented before. So a lot of to-dos, and we hope you found this session engaging and interesting. I personally love looking at creatives and kind of analyzing what could be done better or what was done well. So we hope you liked it. And in terms of like the overall bootcamp series, we've spoken about how you can plan like a pro, which is a huge part of campaign success. We've spoken about having good creative. And then the next step is on June 17th, our last bootcamp session. We're going to talk about reporting and how you can actually measure success in your YouTube ad strategy. So don't miss out on that one. We are going to have a guest speaker from our product team come firsthand and explain us all the best practices.
Yes, it's going to be super exciting. We're really happy to have the guest speaker. It'll be jam-packed with information just like today was. So definitely bookmark it. We did have a date change, which was sent out in the emails. So bookmark the new date, June 17th at the same time, 11 a.m. EST. And then, of course, like Neil said, all of the links that we shared today in the presentation and in the chat will be in that post email. So make sure to check it out. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.